Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I invite you to a new program, Tribute to the Sons of Hercules. And I have with me Brian Walker of Brian's Driving Theater, and joining us soon will be Michael Bill Lucy. Greetings and welcome, Brian. How are you?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you doing?
I'm looking forward to this. I've been wanting to do it for a long time. We kind of tried it a few times in the
Uh,
years past, but never continued. Now I have it booked for like the entire year.
this is a and this is a great topic too, because so many of us who remember these films were first exposed to them in TV syndication packages.
And
Uh, Particularly if you're of a certain age, if you're like 70 down to, I want to say about 55 or so, that's where you saw these movies. And The Sons of Hercules was the first, or one of the, I should say, one of the first packages designed for sword and sandal films, for peplums. Uh,
yes, I remember I was enamored of it because of my associations with the mythic Hercules, my Lemnian heritage. And there are stories told by the ancients of the sons and daughters of Hercules. So when I was growing up and I was watching these things on television, I thought that these modern retellings were the same stories that the ancients told, notably Euripides, which wasn't the case. And it was really, they took a lot of unrelated films, like a dozen or so, put them together, and what tied them together was a theme song and some words at the beginning or the end of the episode. It was brilliant, but it captivated my imagination. Like you, I worked in education, and I remember at one education event that they had me speaking, I talked about how the Sons of Hercules influenced my career choices. And I wanted to topple tyrants and fight monsters that caused social ills, and I didn't want to hit anything. So I was inspired by the Sons of Hercules sent to the human services and deal with it on that level. And they liked the speech so much that they paid me to give it for a few years every time they had a function. So anyway, I pass the baton over to you.
this particular syndication package was assembled by Embassy, and their intention was to sell this to specific markets across the United States, Canada too. Um, and they envisioned something a little bit different than your usual movie syndication package. What they did was is they tried to find movies of a certain length. They needed something about 94, 95 minutes, if not a little longer, so that they could trim it down a little bit. But they divided each film into two episodes. So there were 13 movies originally, which that gave them 26 episodes. So if you run each episode twice, that gives you a year's worth of programming if you do it weekly. Let's say Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon or Saturday at midnight, something of that nature. Um, Another thing to remember about this syndication package is the timing of it. 1964 is when Embassy put this package together, and they made sure that they picked films that had not been theatrically released in the United States, but had already been theatrically released in Europe and Asia. Um, they found, like I said, 13 movies. The first one that ever aired was Mole Men Against the Son of Hercules. Its original title, well, the I should say the translation of the original title is Machiste, the Strongest Man in the World, and it's a Mark Forrest film. So that was the first episode that aired, and again, that aired in 1964. The film was actually released in 1961, and they had to, when they were dubbed, they had to do an overlay on the storyline, as you pointed out, in order to make it match up to be the Son of Hercules. A lot of these movies were Machiste films. Um, a few of them were Hercules films, but certainly not all of them. They borrowed heavily, from one hero, and another in there. But it was a really smart way to package all of it, and it first aired about 62 years ago. Actually, it was late June of 1964. Eventually, Embassy, because the initial um, release to a few TV stations had gone well, Embassy was able to sell it in other markets too. I am in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania market, and Pittsburgh got it in early 1965. I was unable to figure out which television station in Pittsburgh got it, however. The information that saw said that it was Channel 3 in Pittsburgh. There is no Channel 3 in Pittsburgh. There's a 2 and a 4, but there's no 3. So I was going to guess that maybe it was KDKA because it's Channel 2. KDKA is one of the oldest TV stations around. And started out as a Dumont station in 1949. Um, and they sold it in other pockets. They sold it in the South, in Texas and Tennessee. A lot of the Northern California affiliates got it as well. And these 13 films, like I said, actually 26 episodes since they were cut in two. And then they had a liberal time allowed for commercials, as you might imagine. Became very popular. One of the interesting things about this is that it's perhaps the earliest TV syndication package in which every film was in color. Now, most people watching it probably only saw it in black and white, at least in the original pairings. And when you saw it as a kid, was it black and white for you?
It was black and white. We didn't have a color TV until I was much older, so it was in black and white like everything else.
Right. Well, NBC, of the three networks, NBC started doing a lot of experimentation with color in the early 1950s, and they began regularly airing certain TV shows in color back in 1953. That's really early. Early color televisions were horribly expensive. I mean, almost as much as a cheap car. And it could be depending on the cabinetry. Some of them had bars built into them. So they were pieces of furniture as much as they were, communication devices, really. Um, but by the early 1960s, color TV technology was getting cheaper and cheaper, and it was finding its way into more homes. And it was giving NBC a leg up on the other two networks in that they were able to show color content, and ABC rarely had it, and CBS only had it here and there. But as more and more NBC and CBS affiliates began getting color equipment, the request for color films being released in these syndication packages went up, and that's why I say that this is probably, I would say, more than likely the first syndication package that offered all color films, and that also gave them a leg up too. And I think that's one of the things that helped give these films a new life. This genre didn't last too long. It lasted from roughly 1958 to 1965. But it became popular all over again on television when you could see them in syndication packages. And those packages were still on when I was a kid. I can remember seeing some of these films in the early 1970s when I was a child. So it had filtered out into other markets. Now, I'm sure that the copies by them, which were these pan and scan 16 millimeter copies that didn't look very good, and back then with the aspect ratio on then contemporary CRT television displays, widescreen didn't work very well because you were going to have some sort of image loss. If you put bars at the top and the bottom, you were going to lose a lot of the detail in it. It was going to would make the picture much smaller, but you could at least see all of it. Pan and scan wipes out, I want to say 35 to 40% of the image. So you're missing anything that's going on the sides. And occasionally the people doing the pan and scan will try to accommodate for that by moving the 16 millimeter camera around. And it's not always very successful. And that's my biggest complaint about these TV syndication packages is that they kind of changed the films. I mean, it was a necessary. There was no going from one aspect ratio to the other. I suppose they could have, the TV manufacturers could have tried to have maybe elongated, things, but they didn't see the need for it. I guess they didn't really have to adapt for that until much, much, much later. I guess the 90s is when I first remember people getting horribly expensive TVs that could accommodate the widescreen, but you didn't have any source material or very little.
The mom and pop stores used to have the Sons of Hercules as well as a lot of the sword and sandal films. So some of them used to sell copies of these under the table. So I started collecting the old Sons of Hercules films, and there were places like Something Weird Video that started coming out with them.
Mhm.
So
Well, um, uh, uh, in your area, do you have half price books? It's a chain of used bookstores.
I haven't been to Manhattan in years, but I imagine they have it in Manhattan if anywhere. We used to have bookstores all over the place. There were several in Tenafly. That's not true anymore.
Well, Half Price Books is a chain out of Texas, and we have a couple of locations in Pittsburgh. The one I go to most often has still a pretty healthy DVD collection. They carry a lot of the alpha video titles,
Mhm.
the ones in the very lightweight clamshell, and they're always public domain titles at that. And sometimes the transfers aren't the best. You see a lot of the Sons of Hercules films on alpha DVDs. And I'm not beating up on them because something's better than nothing, but oftentimes they're the old pan and scan copies that don't look great, which is a shame. If you look on YouTube, you can find some pretty good copies of these. And the reason I'm complaining about the alpha titles is that I have one which I was going to watch, and then the image quality is so bad that I just couldn't hang with it. And it is Ulysses against the Son of Hercules. Original title being Ulysses against Hercules.
And that's a more accurate title because the son of Hercules in that film is called Hercules. So is it Hercules Jr. or that was not the title, the original title of the film?
Well, the thing for me that's most interesting is that Hercules in this film is not somebody who was not necessarily. I mean, I can't say that he's not muscular, but he wasn't known for his muscularity. I mean, certainly not Steve Reeves or Reg Park. Or any of these people who were 0% body fat, look fantastic. Not to take anything away from Mike Lane, who was an American actor who portrayed Hercules in this film, and not to say that he had a pot belly or anything. I mean, he had been a professional athlete for a number of years. Mike Lane started out as a professional wrestler when he was about 18, 19 years old. So you're really young. Now he was physically imposing. He was about 6'8", 6'9", weighed in the upper 200s, I think about 270, 275 or so. So he was a big guy. And um, in the professional wrestling circuit, he became pretty popular because he was just huge. And early 1950s television, I've heard my dad talk about it. He said that when he first started seeing TV, first before his parents got one in the early 1950s, his grandparents had a television. So when he would go to their house, and this is probably, I don't know, 1950, 1951, something like that. He said that the only thing that was on was studio wrestling.
You can imagine.
And his grandparents loved it, so that's all they ever watched. The studio wrestling was fantastically popular, and that's how Mike Lane started getting noticed. A lot of people watched it. It was so inexpensive in terms of programming for local TV stations and the networks as well, and wildly popular. I mean, wrestling, the WWE and all that stuff, still popular today. But that was sort of the early early part of television is that you had a lot of wrestling matches because they were cheap and easy to shoot and very popular with audiences at the time. So he got noticed by people in Hollywood and started taking roles in TV shows and in movies. He quit wrestling in 1959 when he was about 26 years old or so because his movie career was actually doing pretty well and he wasn't getting beaten up like crazy. He'd been doing a lot of stunt work too in films. And the first thing that I remember seeing Mike Lane in was a Saturday morning kid show that I used to watch when I was a kid. It was called Monster Squad. I've always been a big horror buff, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, all the Universal monsters, and this kids show offered all three of them. It was unfortunately it only had 13 episodes to it, and they were half-hour episodes. They ran it for a couple of years though. They just kept beating them into the ground. And Mike Lane was Frank N. Stein on the show. Now it was more of a comedy, but it was shot in the same vein as Batman, in that these monsters were actually trying to do good with the help of Fred Grandy from the Love Boat and later from Congress. Fred Grandy was this guy who worked in a mortuary, and in the basement, that's where you have the monsters. It was a really cute, clever concept. I thought great for kids. The thing that killed it was its budget. It was a very pricey Saturday morning show for kids. I don't know if you ever saw any of the early '70s kids programming, like Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, Lidsville.
HR Puffin stuff and so forth.
Well, Greg was in college when those things were on, and he and his friends liked to smoke pot, and watch them because they were really trippy. And I can imagine that this might have fallen into the same vein, especially since it was very Batman-like in terms of execution. And every episode had a really impressive guest star list. Julie Newmar, speaking of Batman, is in one of the episodes. And if you look at them, and you can find a DVD copy of all 13 episodes. Unfortunately, it's out of print. You have to buy it used. There is a Region 2 print that's available, but you have to have an all region DVD player, and most people don't. We're Region 1 in the United States. But Region 2 is like most of Europe, parts of Asia, not Japan, because Japan uses Region 1 like we do.
PAL version.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and interestingly, though, and like I said, that kid show was one of my favorites, when I was probably like 10 years old or something like that. But interestingly, Mike Lane, because he was 6'8", 6'9", had already played the Frankenstein monster in a movie back in the late 1950s. He is in a movie with Boris Karloff called Frankenstein 70. It actually was released in 1958, not 1970, which always used to trip me up when I was a kid. Because I used to think, well, why is it called Frankenstein 70 if it came out in 1958? So I always thought that there was like a typo in the book or something. That was true. And it was initially I thought when I was younger, a kid, I thought that Frankenstein 70 must have been a European film. Because Boris Karloff was making a lot of European films in the late 1950s. But this is actually shot on the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank on an 8-day production schedule. And the movie was sold to Allied Artists, which had been Monogram before they changed their name and tried to move into bigger and better films. Allied Artists paid quite a bit for this movie. Frankenstein 70. I guess on the strength of having Boris Karloff in it, they paid $250,000 for it, which I can tell you, whoever produced this spent nowhere near that putting this thing on film. I bet it was probably shot for about $80,000. So somebody made some dough here in the late 1950s. But Allied artists wanted something to pair with Queen of Outer Space, which was a movie that they had already procured. And that stars, it's the infamous movie from the late 1950s with Zsa Zsa Gabor and Eric Fleming. And there's a colony of women in outer space who are all, you know, very shapely and very well coiffed, very well dressed. And it's a colony of only women. And they need men in order to survive. So it's sort of that heterosexual male fantasy kind of.
Even these outer space movies, I have a stack of them, just the same theme. They're different movies, and they're made over a period of several decades. But that's the basic premise for all of them.
Well, yeah, yeah. I guess it's, for lack of anything better to say. Both movies are a lot of fun, and that would have been a good drive-in double bill, to tell you the truth. Queen of Outer Space is not nearly as bad as it's made out to be. It's certainly not science fiction, but it's fun and campy. You know, it's a quick watch. And Frankenstein 70 is not a bad film either. And Mike Lane makes a pretty good Frankenstein, to tell you the truth. And part of it's because he doesn't have to wear built up shoes. I mean, he just literally is, you know, this big guy, you know, this monster. Even though he's very young in that movie. Boris Karloff was, oh golly, you know, way up in his 40s when he portrayed the Frankenstein monster. Um, but Mike Lane would have only been, oh, I don't know, like 24 when that movie was shot. So it was a very young Frankenstein.
I remember that movie. Michael Lane was also not the typical Hercules. He was kind of like a soft-hearted um, Hercules who harbored a crush for one of the female protagonists, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. And you know, for me, that it's a fun movie too. Whenever you have, you know, two protagonists, you know, going at it. And in this case, Ulysses is the protagonist or the antagonist, depending on how you look at it. Ulysses here is portrayed by Georges Marchal, who's a French actor who was in a lot of swashbuckling movies in the 1950s and 1960s. Like a very handsome French actor who you know, lived a pretty long life and worked fairly long into his life. But there again, not somebody who was incredibly muscular. Um, in addition, you know, like I said, Mike Lane, who was a professional athlete, was a big guy and in good shape, but nothing like, you know, Reg Park, you know, for example, or Brad Harris or Mark Forrest or somebody who was in fantastic shape.
Didn't have the beard and mustache too.
Mm-hmm. And Marshall is, ooh, I want to say like probably 42, 43 here. So I'm not being ageist or anything, but he's not a young man. You know, here he's getting into middle age. I'm, like I said, not pointing fingers at anybody, but you know, to be in that kind of role, I mean, he is an older guy. Um, Now, looking over the titles of the movies that were released into the Sons of Hercules package, these are a lot of fun. And I think it's a terrific introduction to the genre. You get a nice cross section of Peplum actors. Like I said, Mole Men versus the Son of Hercules is Mark Forrest. Triumph of the Son of Hercules, which is public domain and pretty easy to find on archive.org or YouTube, is a Kirk Morris movie, and Morris is one of my favorite Peplum actors. And another really good one by an actor who didn't do very many films, or just a few, unfortunately. Reg Lewis does Fire Monsters Against the Son of Hercules, with one of my favorite British actresses, Margaret Lee, who was in some Eurospy stuff in the 60s. And she did some, I don't think she did a few giallos and some of the late 60s European sex comedy things. They were they were more hype than titillation, to tell you the truth, but she was in some of those as well. Roger Brown made one, well, is in one, I guess I should say. The original title of the movie he made was Mars, God of War. But the retitle on that is Venus Against the Son of Hercules. Um, Now, the one that I've got on right now is Medusa Against the Son of Hercules. And I got to say, looking over this list, which is pretty impressive, I think this is actually my favorite of the Sons of Hercules movies. The Medusa in this is really creepy. It's exceedingly well done, to tell you the truth. I like that element of horror that is added in this film, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's one of my favorites. Well, that and because it's Richard Harrison, and I really like the few Peplum films that he did. And
Uh, Started making me aware that this was something constructed and not real in terms of thematically, because I knew that Perseus, who is the son of Hercules in the son of Hercules versus Medusa, um, is the grandson or great grandson or great grandfather rather of Hercules. So
mm,
Hercules' ancestor is one of his sons, and then the fire monsters they were cavemen.
yes.
So you have a caveman being a son of Hercules. That started me inquiring, sort of stimulating inquiring mind to look into this. That's when I discovered the concept of a franchise. Because I thought it was like the myths. You have different versions, but they're all pretty much tied to one another. And I became aware that this was not so. The something.
Well, Fire Monsters to me, it has a scene in it that just blows my mind that no union official would ever sign off on. They've got the actors at one point, including Reg Lewis and Margaret Lee, submerged up to their necks in this pool of muck, essentially. And like I said, I'm sure that that the screen actors, I mean, the Guild would never let them get away with that. But it was Europe, so. But that scene has. Whenever I think of fire monsters against the son of Hercules, that's the scene I think of when they're just submerged up to their necks. Um, and there again, that's I saw these films originally in a syndication package when I was probably, I don't know, like 7, 8 years old, um, and that has stuck with me ever since the first time I saw it.
Maybe you can answer this question. Why did they never come out with a Sons of Hercules collection on DVD or Blu-ray?
I think it's because all of the copies are not in great shape.
Mhm.
They were done for television, and TV stations used 16 millimeter film. Who knows whatever happened to the negatives that they struck from these? The copies that you can see now are just restored versions of the old 16 millimeter, like a copy from a TV station that had been run 100 times and had sprocket damage and scratches and jump cuts and all the things that I find endearing, but most audiences don't. Um, and I think that's why you never really saw one. And it would be arduous to go back and cut the movies the way they are cut. If you found let's say, a great copy of oh, I don't know, Goliath and the Rebel Slave, which was retitled Tyrant of Lydia Against the Son of Hercules. That's a Gordon Scott movie. If you found a really nice original widescreen version of that, you might be able to trim it and then overlay the dubbing onto it, to make it conform to what would have been shown. But that would be a lot of work, and so far, at least, nobody's ever done it. And these films are public domain for the most part. Only a couple of them aren't, but most of them are public domain. And a lot of these are available on archive.org. Unfortunately, the copies that you find on archive.org of the Gordon Scott Sons of Hercules movies are just in deplorable condition, and I don't think anything better is available, unfortunately.
One of the things I plan to do with this new series is something I'd started before twice, and my attention was drawn elsewhere, but now it's part of the series, so I'm going to keep on top of the sun. Is I'm going to focus on one movie a month and publish everything related to that movie. Copies of the movie, if there are parodies of the movie, like on Mystery Science Fiction 3000, I'll have that. I'll have uh, the Wikipedia and IMDb and any articles I could find. I'll put up whatever images I could find, and I'll link to your website and what you have on it there.
Oh, okay.
Great for the now. I'm going to do that with the Mole Men versus Summer Cartoon. So by the time we have the next one, all that stuff will be there. People can browse it if they're thrilled or follow it as we put it up and watch the movie ahead of time so that they know what we're talking about. And there's a lineup of people who are interested in doing this, and everybody's focus is a little bit different. So we'll have like a complete picture or collage anyway of information for people who are listening in. So I'm really looking forward to this.
It sounds great.
Thanks.
Anyway, going back to the color angle on this, even though that was a big selling point for Embassy when they were trying to market this to TV stations, um, and there was more and more interest in color TV as each year went by. Um, some television shows were shot in color, but it was pretty rare. Bonanza, even though it started in 1959, was shot in color. Now that was an NBC television show, the one with Lauren Green, the Western with Lauren Green and Michael Landon, Dan Blocker, Pernell Roberts. And The Adventures of Superman, the syndicated series from the 1950s. The first two seasons were in black and white, and even though the series was shot on the cheap, they did switch to color during for season three because they wanted to try to make it more marketable in syndication to NBC affiliates, which is the reason they did it.
The Bobs too, they switched to from starting black and white and it became color at some point in the movie.
Now, when I was a kid, and this is a little afield, but when I was a small child, I can I guess I'm fortunate in that I can remember way back. Um, I was probably, I don't know, 3, 4 at the time, but I would say probably 3 years old. I was watching Saturday morning cartoons, and before my parents got up, um, this was probably, I don't know, like 7 or 8 in the morning. I was in the living room watching the TV, and all of a sudden, the screen just went down to 1 pixel. I mean, I guess the picture tube went. They didn't last very long back then. 4 or 5 years for a picture tube was a long time. I don't think this TV was that old either. Um, and I can remember my parents going out and getting a new living room TV that's color and such. My mom and I have some different remembrances of it. She said that they bought the new color TV because of the moon landing that was coming, that they were hyping on TV, which I guess would have been like June, July of '69, whenever they bought it. But I thought that the TV that I was watching was color as well. But I'm not really sure. I can remember my grandparents, into the early '70s. Um, People who had lived through the Depression were never going to swap out their black and white TV for a color one until they had to. And my grandmother had furniture that all matched. The TV, like I said, was a piece of furniture at the time. It was wood, it had wood cabinet, and it was all done in early '60s blonde wood. So, and everything, the end tables, the coffee table, desk, everything in the living room was that blonde wood. Well, when the TV died and she had to get a new TV, everything updated to Spanish modern. So around 1970, 1971, all the colors, all the furniture changed in the house because the TV died.
Yes, that is profound.
I'm kind of matchy matchy like that too. My grandmother was. She would never have brought in a TV that didn't go with the other woods. She was forced to buy new furniture, I suppose, for the living room.
Record players too. Record players were piece of major furniture. You had the record
Well, and you know,
album.
she had one of those giant cabinet model
Yeah,
stereos, and that was in the family room, which was off the living room. And those were like big, hulking,
yes.
heavy, solid wood back at the time. Beautifully finished, to tell you the truth. Most of them looked like credenzas.
Hmm.
Oh, they were fairly unobtrusive. Um, I can remember a few of them that actually had bars built into them. Some of those were big, though.
Action. Yeah, ours didn't have a bar in it, but my mother had that as a piece of furniture until like maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm, really? Wow. Um,
Didn't use it for anything other than piece of furniture and to store the albums, but she had it there.
those old cabinet model stereos actually sounded pretty good too. And I think it was because they were these like 200-pound pieces of wood. So wood usually works well when it comes to sound reproduction, speaker construction, and so forth. And in addition to looking good, a lot of those sounded good. As the one that my mother and father had one that it was they probably got in, I don't know, like 1967 or so, and it was the credenza look. It had these sliding panels that slid over the speaker grills so that it just looked like a credenza when it wasn't in use. Um, and I liked that, how it was hidden, like that. And there again, it sounded great. It was a silver tone.
And now TVs mount on walls.
And they're this thick. You remember, I mean, even TVs like back in the 90s, especially as the CRTs got bigger and bigger. I think the biggest one we ever had was like a 35 or something like that.
Uh,
And that was a big mother. I mean, it was this hulking TV and deep, too. So you had to have these, big pieces of furniture to put them in,
yeah.
which we did. In fact, that one of those pieces of furniture is still in the garage, holding a bunch of tools and crap. But those things were huge, and now they're so thin.
They're,
You just mount them on the wall. And the last one that I mounted uh, was, I think, a 65 or a 70, and it was about everything I could do, mount it. In fact, I think I did have to get some help from somebody just to put it. I had the mount and everything done. I just had to have somebody to help me lift it so that I got it on right without dropping it.
and they've gotten affordable too. The prices seem to have gone down considerably.
Oh, TVs used to be really expensive.
Yeah. Now they
I
move.
Well, when I was a kid, I had a TV in my bedroom that was black and white. And this, I want to say, this was probably I was probably like 7, 8, 9 years old. Um, it was a terrible TV. It was a TV from the early '60s that my parents had bought when they got married. So it was a portable. And the contrast was awful on it. Instead of black and white, it was sort of light gray and dark gray. And it was a small screen. And it was old at that point, so it was just a terrible portable TV, but with its own built-in rabbit ears. And I think it only got two channels. It got PBS, and I think it got ABC or something like that. Whatever local affiliates that we had. Um, and it's got so bad, and I wasn't allowed to hook it up to the cable in the house because my dad said it would degrade the signal, and he was probably right, but he could have gone out and gotten a booster. But anyway, um, I asked for a new TV for my birthday, and all I wanted was just one that was newer that had better contrast, just another black and white. And those were cheap, well, cheap for the time back then. Those little black and white portables were what, like $79, something like that. I'm thinking that's what they were. But my parents surprised me for my birthday that year because they got me a GE Portacolor. So I had a little TV, but it was color. And I was allowed to hook it up to the antenna in the house, so it didn't degrade the signal because my dad actually would go out and buy a booster. So, so, so I didn't degrade the signal anymore. And I don't know how much I ever watched the living room TV after that. I just had the one in my bedroom, and that's what I watched.
I remember when the VCRs were like $500, $400. And
Ooh, my first VCR cost a fortune.
yes, and I bought a VCR for $400 to $500. I bought Conan the Barbarian for $80, $90. It's my first film on VHS. And then a new color TV, I think they were like $350, $400 for
Even
these.
for 25, yeah, they were pretty pricey. I first got a VCR when I was in high school, and I worked. I actually made halfway decent money as a high school student, but I worked a lot. Um, and and I wanted a VCR. I didn't know anybody who had one, so it wasn't fear of missing out or anything like that. I just wanted one. I'd been reading about them for years. I was a Super 8 millimeter movie enthusiast, so I saw a lot of that information in the guides for Super 8 and in some of the sales literature as well. And I really wanted one. And I saved and saved and saved. And I finally bought one. I bought one of the very first stereo VHS VCRs. And I ordered it from a place in Maine called LaBelle Camera and Stereo. And that thing cost a fortune. But you know what? I bet it worked. My mother kept it after I left home. I bet it worked for 30 years minimum.
Wow.
It played fairly regularly too. It was a moose. It weighed a ton. It sounded great though. I mean, if I had it all when I was a teenager, I had it all hooked up to my stereo, and you could when you we I started taping stuff in stereo, and early on you could get certain movies like Purple Rain by Prince was released in stereos, and that sounded amazing with that VCR and stereo setup that I had at the time. I don't listen to music now, which is a shame, but I really enjoyed it once upon a time. Was a big enthusiast, and I had decent equipment.
I listen to an occasional song on YouTube, but I used to like listen to music a lot more when I was younger, and I don't do that anymore.
Well, we've got satellite radio in two of the cars, but I want to dump my subscription because it's a huge waste of money. I'm not listening to it. Um, and even if I were, I've got the app on my phone that I could just use Greg's account and listen to it in any car that I wanted to. So I don't know. I'm more inclined to listen to music if I'm on the treadmill. Uh, you, but I just don't listen to that much music anymore. It's a shame too. I used to really enjoy it.
I still like exercising to the couple of movements. It sounds like and I have in my room here, it serves as my bedroom and my gym and my studio for the television channel. I have all sorts of statues, Greek statues of the gods and heroes of Greece and Rome. And then I have all these posters. So I'm surrounded by this inspiration, really helps me look out and meditate too.
That's something that Mae West used to keep very old photographs of herself in her apartment because she thought that it kept her young.
I can see that.
Saw herself that way, so she tried to maintain, the way she looked, so she still looked like that. So yeah, there's probably something to that. I think that's a good idea.
Now, do you think there'll ever be someone inspired enough to make a remake movie of the Sons of Hercules, even if it's just a parody of little dozen or so films?
I wouldn't see, excuse me, I wouldn't see why not. We're starting to see, well, yeah, I should say, we're starting to see more films in theaters now that are shot and directed by people who are YouTube hobbyists, essentially. People who started making short films on YouTube and then pull together, a film and distribution for it. And people are, I like to, I'm kind of excited about seeing situations like this arise because I'm so sick of these blockbuster things that we're all supposed to see. Um, I want to see something new and fresh and different. I'm sick of seeing the same Spider-Man movie, remade every 5 years or so. I mean, let's get past this. Can we draw another character, please? And I think you're only going to see people taking risks, and you're only going to see something new out of people who are doing it on at the cheap by themselves. I think it's the only way that we're going to see any fresh content, any really interesting storylines, bizarre, twisted plots. You're never going to get that out of Hollywood. They want the easiest thing that they can find, and they've been actively dumbing down movies so that I don't really know. Here it is. They've been dumbing down movies so that people won't miss plot points when they're sitting in the theater and sitting in front of their TV, looking at their phones.
Yeah.
That's so boring. I mean, when you watch, and I've seen a few movies like that, where the director, anything like in a mystery or something like that, the director indicates so hard as to what's going on that they might as well just have an arrow pointing at the evidence. It's just, there are a few horror films like that too, and it's like, oh my God, this is awful. you you got to have a little bit of mystery about it. You can't dumb it down so much that if you do, it just makes it dull and insipid. And that's what we're getting now, largely. I I've only seen a few movies this year, and I got to tell you, I should say, a few new movies, and I haven't been blown away by any of them. And
Well, say you could get away with multi-million dollar looking effects for nothing if you master some basic AI. So a lot of people are doing that as well. And there's been talk of bringing back actors like Marilyn Monroe in the new films through AI. So it's a very weird time we live in.
and I got to tell you, I'm really uncomfortable with AI. The longer it goes on, the less I like it. Um, I don't want to see something that's entirely created by AI because it doesn't have any soul, it doesn't have any life, and it's just rubber stamped from the other content that it finds. So it's so homogenous. I just no. Let's go with the young YouTube content creators who go out and make their own entertainment. That's the only salvation that I possibly see for any of this. And if somebody would step up and do a peplum, I think it would be wildly popular, to tell you the truth, because everything everything is superhero now. When it comes to the DC and Marvel, I that is so connected to Peplum films. I would think that that would be kind of a natural for people. I guess we just have to get the right young, bright, creative type to see some of these movies and to pay attention to them, and maybe that person will do something with the genre, get it jump started again.
I just brought this up on another show, but the superheroes are going to be going into the public domain in the not too distant future. Like Popeye is now in the public domain,
Betty
and
Boop, yeah.
it's a Popeye horror movie. It's There was one that just came out, The Return of Popeye, or Popeye's Return or Revenge, or something like that, where Popeye, it turns out, was a member of um, an army, enhanced army soldier program, like Captain America, and that's why Popeye's the way he is. It's very bizarre, and again, there are a lot of Popeye as a monster movies. When Batman and Superman and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and all those guys make it into public domain, we're very interested to see the type of movies we get and whether they'll be more stirring than the ones we've been getting from Hollywood.
Well, a lot of the Universal monsters on January 1st are uh, going to have public domain. The 1931 versions of Dracula and Frankenstein uh, will be public domain, and I plan on running them in early January this coming year. Um, I I'm kind of a purist, so I'm not really sure. I mean, I like camp and parody too, but I'm not really sure that I want to see Popeye lopping people's heads off. I but that said, I like Popeye a lot, and I've probably seen a lot of the Popeye movies with Olive Oyl and Sweet Pea and Wimpy. Wimpy's one of my favorite characters, actually. I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Yesterday, I watched part of the Sweet Popeye movie. Popeye killed somebody with an anchor. So at that point, I stopped watching. I stopped watching.
Well, at least they stayed with the nautical theme, though. I like that. Excuse me.
So, and Steamboat Willie was made into a monster, and Winnie the
Oh, that's
Pooh
right. Yeah.
several times, and Banana Bunch, I think, and all sorts of,
Oh, the banana splits.
yeah,
Mhm.
but that's good. So
Going back to Sons of Hercules, what's your favorite title among the 13 movies that were released into this syndication package? What's your favorite
I
movie?
like them all pretty much equally. Because again, I was conditioned to view them as one big thing. So the franchise, I see it as a whole still, even though I was disillusioned as a kid as to what that meant, it being a franchise. I think of Perseus against the Son of Hercules is one of my favorites, definitely.
For me, like I said, which just finished, but for me, the Medusa against the Son of Hercules is probably my favorite. Perseus, as you pointed out. But there's actually, gosh, while that may be my favorite, there's other really good movies here. There's the Dan Vadas film, which is Hercules the Invincible. For the Sons of Hercules, it's Son of Hercules in the Land of Darkness, which is available from archive.org. Um, Another good one is another Kirk Morris film, which is Devil of the Desert against the Son of Hercules. And it's a good movie, and I'm not sure if I have it up on the page, but currently, but I have had it on the Kirk Morris page in the past, The Devil of the Desert against the Son of Hercules.
I remember also um, I'm having a fuzzy brain day, so forgive me, I'm storing things together. Um, when I was growing up in Greece, there were people called machistes, which is where you get the word machiste,
Mhm.
and they used to travel from town to town performing feats of strength. And they used to dress, pretty much topless with like a wrestling person's pants or just like a little loincloth or something. And they used to go from town to town, and they were called machistas. So the machista movies to me always had that meaning. It wasn't a personal name, it was like occupation. And some of them took on the names of Hercules or Samson. So you had like Samson and Hercules and so forth. So I had those entertainments live when I was young and used to go on vacation. So when we were playing on the television, it was just the same thing and it's still going on. So there's something very living about it. The first time I saw modern day Greek people, I was really young, and my grandparents were coming over. And all I knew about Greece, aside from stories my parents would tell, were the peplum films. So my grandmother and grandfather came to our house for the first time. I was very disappointed and asked where the Greek clothes are. I thought everybody in Greece dressed like the peplum.
So you wanted them to come in,
Yeah,
yeah, wearing a peplum. Interesting. Um, I, you don't see entertainment like that anymore. It's such a shame. When I was a kid, and oh God, it was a long time ago now that I think about it, 50 some years ago. You used to see more traveling entertainment. I can remember magicians seemed to be popular when I was a kid. And sometimes they would perform in like school auditoriums, uh, older grindhouse theaters they might perform in during the day that ran movies at night. And they were a lot of fun.
yeah, they were. They had magicians too. They were strong. They had magicians. They had traveling cinema. They used to show the movies in the middle of town and then pass around a basket so you could give money toward uh, whatever performance was going on. They're really, really great. And I miss those. They're long in the past.
Well, and sadly, stuff like that's never going to come back because now, you have any and all kinds of entertainment right here.
Yes.
And, back then too, people weren't as entertainment driven. Uh, I'm not going to go into a big rant, but I went to Target yesterday and I go about, I don't know, once or twice a week to Target. And there was a young mom who was letting her at best toddler, this was a small child, watch some incredibly annoying child programming, on her phone. And it was blaring, and I hate those tinny speakers
Yes.
that you get on those anyway. And I have a hearing issue from time to time, and those speakers just set it off, and I had to get away from her at Target because it was driving me insane. And I just thought you could actually interact with your child. The kid does not need to be entertained 24/7. Turn the damn phone off and talk to it. Raise it. Drives me crazy. I mean, there's no face-to-face interaction anymore. Everybody's doing this.
We're old codgers, Brian.
Well, actually, to tell you the truth, I'm kind of bad to do this too. But but I certainly don't do it when I'm out in public. And it's getting more and more common that older people who can't hear very well, bring their phone in. It comes in Giant Eagle, which is a grocery store chain out of Pittsburgh, this morning, and there was this older woman in there, probably older than I am, who was talking at the top of her lungs at some other old person while she was shopping in the store. You could hear her everywhere. I wanted to choke her.
Yep. Welcome to our new world. And I looked at the clock. We're out of time in our today's conversation. How can people find you and enter the wonderful world of Brian's Drive-In Theater? There are many portals, and you're very attentive to your fans because you will get back to people. That's how we connected like over a decade ago.
Well, stop by Brian's Drive-In Theater at briansdriveintheater.com. Any search engine, Bing, Microsoft Bing, I should say, Yahoo, Google, whatever you use should get you to me. You can also find me on Facebook as Brian Walker or Brian's Drive-In Theater. And there's an account out there for Brian's Drive-In Theater that I need to retire and just shove into my main account. So look for Brian Walker, Brian's Drive-In Theater on Facebook, and you should find me and friend me.
If you could send me that information in personal message, I will do it right away.
Okay.
I'll remember you asked me to do something, but I'll remember exactly the direction. Ask me to do. I intend on inviting you to every single episode. If you're free, you're more than welcome to be a regular. You're more than welcome to be a guest person, whatever you'd like to do. I'd be honored to have you involved. And thank you very much for all the information and remembrances and insights that you offered on today's show.
Well, thank you, Hercules, and have a good evening.
You too. Now, put on glasses and press the right button. Here we go.